Dear students, welcome to my classroom of modern Chinese history. Today I am going to give you some ideas on Chinese women, their movement and their position in the contemporary China. History of gender is a very important epoch of any branch of knowledge. In that case, even in science also we have gender historiography, the contributions of the women scientists. Similarly, in the other fields as well, we have seen how the women they excelled through the intellect and wisdom and also their understanding capability of the situation. So, women they are definitely an important part for the growth and development of any civilization. And that is a priori, that means an ultimate truth. There are many historians who wrote on women, and writing on women started from 1970s onwards, especially when we started considering women's history as a branch of knowledge. Women's studies as a specific discipline of knowledge had started functioning in US or in America from 1970s onwards. There we have seen the writers and activists and the academicians like Joan Kelly, Gerda Lerner, who talked about women's studies. Before that, in 1949, we have seen how the French women they expressed their desires to be independent and emancipated. Here I would like to give you the reference of The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir. Before that, in the 18th century, we have seen the women like Virginia Woolf. She wrote about her world, and that world was definitely an imprisoned or a caged world. So it might be wrong to assert that women they did not have any history, but there were very few who thought to document the history of women or their own stories. Even in our own country, in India also, we find from 1970s or 80s onwards, more writings started to take a definite shape on women's historiography. In this regard, we may take the names of Shukumari Bhattacharya or later Yashodhara Bagchi. Now we would like to see what was the condition of women in ancient China and how it developed or progressed towards betterment. In ancient China, women were subordinate to first and foremost their fathers, secondly their husbands, and lastly as widows, their sons. That means they were subordinate to their sons at the last phase of their life. At that time, religious and philosophical norms had been set up by men to benefit themselves in a male-dominated society. Needless to say, women's status was far from equal to the status of men, either socially or politically. During the Communist Revolution in 1949, gender equality played by contrast a major role in encouraging millions of Chinese women to mobilize and join the revolution. Mao Zedong's well-known saying, "Women hold up half the sky," seems to reflect the party's emphasis on women's role in society. Mao Zedong, in his various writings, he wrote about the importance of women in society, that how they can be the instruments to bring revolution, or they can help the men to usher revolution or the change. So, they need to be educated, they have to be the good mothers, good wives, and also the party cadres who can contribute for the betterment not only of themselves but also how to establish the party rule. That means the rule of the CPC or Communist Party of China. Even in Long March or in many other revolutions, we have seen women participated. And also, we can give the reference of Madam Chiang Kai-shek. She was the wife of Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of KMT or the Nationalist Party. So, she became very instrumental or significant behind the political career of her husband Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek was a great enemy of Mao Zedong, but Madam Chiang Kai-shek, through her political participation or representation on behalf of Chiang Kai-shek, made the position of women politically more relevant in China. Though we have many disputes or controversies or many stories where we can definitely identify the limitations what women faced in China through the ages. The equality for women and men was enshrined in the Constitution. I'm talking about the Constitution which started acting from 1949 onwards. While initiatives that involved women in building the new communist China were introduced. So, through that constitution where women they started getting importance in regard of their economic independence and also political participation, that constitution was a benchmark for the communists to spread their ideology all over China after establishing their rule in 1949. Through posters and speeches, the party projected the image of female socialist icons, so-called iron women, who were depicted as labor heroes that also managed to maintain a harmonious family. However, women were seldom appointed to high positions, and their workload at home in terms of housework and child care remained heavy. So, Chinese women they had to maintain the balance even in 1940s or after independence. And that is also relevant in the context of the present times, that women they are also indebted to God because they are having the quality to become the mothers. And when they are the mothers, they have the household duties and obligations as well. Here one can quote Aristotle, who has identified the role of women in the society being the mothers and also the supporters of the male counterparts of them or of their husbands. So, by this way, Aristotle talked about a social division of labor where women are entrusted with the responsibilities of household and their motherhood. But later on, it became important like how we can situate women in politics, in the cultural milieu, or in the every sphere of the society, which would definitely give them an opportunity to be empowered. So, to maintain the balance was a big task for the Chinese women in modern China after 1940s as well. And they performed well in this regard. That means they tried to maintain the balance as the party activist or the working class women along with their household obligations and their responsibilities for their children. In the 1970s, China was home to the biggest female workforce in the world. Yet, women were often the first ones to be sent home in state factory layoffs. and more women returned to the home when expectations of them having children rose. So in 1970s, we have seen that women participated in the job sector, and also they were active as the workers, or they were the part of the working class, but they had to adjust, or they had to compromise as well. When they were asked to choose between their household obligations and their job responsibilities, definitely women, they prioritized their household responsibilities and left their job. So that is not only in the case of China, that is applicable everywhere, all over the world, that women, they always give priority to their household responsibilities, as detected or as stated by Aristotle in the form of social division of labor long time back. By 1927, as quoted in the Little Red Book of his writings, Mao referred to the oppression of women as feudal patriarchy. I quote, "A man in China is usually subjected to the domination of three systems of authority: political authority, family authority, and religious authority. As for women, in addition to being dominated by these three systems of authority, they are also dominated by the men. The authority of the husband. These four authorities, political, family, religious, and masculine, are the embodiment of the whole feudal patriarchal ideology and system." Unquote. Mao's comments echo those of Lenin, made 6 years earlier for International Women's Day. Now I would like to quote what Lenin said. I quote, "Under capitalism, the female half of the human race suffers under a double yoke. The working woman and peasant woman are oppressed by capital. But in addition to that, even in the most democratic of bourgeois republics, they are, firstly, in an inferior position because the law denies them equality with men. And secondly, and this is the most important, they are in domestic slavery. They are domestic slaves, crushed by the most petty, most menial, and most stultifying work of the kitchen, and by isolated domestic family economy in general." Unquote. So that was the view of Lenin, where he described that women, they are not only the subordinates of patriarchy, they are also the slaves of their domesticity. In 1945, on the verge of revolution, Mao Zedong demanded that it ensure freedom of marriage and equality as between men and women. So, Mao Zedong, he tried to assure women that what they could expect after independence or after the revolution. In 1955, as president of the People's Republic of China, Mao insisted that, I quote, "In order to build a great socialist society, it is of the utmost importance to arouse the broad masses of women to join in productive activity. Men and women must receive equal pay for equal work in production. Genuine equality between the sexes can only be realized in the process of the socialist transformation of society as a whole." Unquote. So he told this in his book or in his writing, The Little Red Book. So now I would like to ask a question or a quiz to my students. So, Mao Zedong, he expressed his ideas in which piece of literature or in which book? Number 1, Das Kapital. Number 2, Communist Manifesto. Number 3, Mein Kampf. And number 4, The Little Red Book. The correct answer is The Little Red Book, which was written by Mao Zedong, where he also expressed his ideas on women. By the end of the 20th century, the statistics for women in China had approached closer than most of the third world to those of Europe and other rich capitalist nations. According to the United Nations figures from UNIFEM, women made up 39% of the workforce, 39% of students in secondary education, and over 20% of the parliament, higher than any other of the 10 richest countries except for Germany, which had 32%. I would like to ask a quiz to my students, like by the end of 20th century, if we would like to know the ratio of women or the percentage of women in the workforce in modern China, it was more than 40%. Number 1, it was more than 52%. Number 2, number 3, it was more than 55%. And number 4, it was more than 39%. The correct answer is option number 4. That is, by the end of 20th century, in the workforce, women constituted 39% in modern China, which was quite impressive. While women's rights have taken a turn for the better, traditional gender roles do still influence today's society, especially when it comes to family and marriage. The term leftover women, which refers to women in their late 20s who are still single, is going out of fashion. But the idea that women must be married by a certain age still holds strong. Marriage pushing is common, and young women face considerable pressure from their parents and relatives to get married. Marriage markets where parents tout their children armed with a CV-like advert containing their educational status, work, income, and height remain common. That is not only in case of China, I think in India also. The girls in their 20s, they face this kind of pressure, irrespective of their financial status. Rising house prices, education costs, and career motivations mean that it is becoming more and more unappealing for many Chinese women to have children. Paired with China's falling birth rate, this has led to concerns about China's declining population. Since the end of the one-child policy, family planning policies are actively encouraging women to have children, and they are expected to take on the majority of the cleaning, cooking, and caring on top of their professional workloads. So this is not something unique in case of China, rather it is very much prevalent in India or in other countries, even in the Western countries as well. As in many countries around the world, things are changing and women are taking a stand against gender inequality. And we need to see what happened in China or what is happening. China's 989 million internet users That means 989 million internet users have stirred up noise about women's rights online. The discussions has been amplified in the public sphere over the last few years through media trends, marketing campaigns and news stories. That means women, they are becoming vocal in regard of their own rights and privileges which they are expressing in the platform that is online. TV shows and films have also played a major role in igniting discussion online. So we have seen the movies Sister and Hi, Mom, which have inspired conversations about women's roles within the family and the continuing gender preference for men. With an unusually female-focused plot and a woman director, Hi, Mom was hugely successful at the Chinese box office and surpassed Wonder Woman to become the top-grossing film of all time with a female director. Today, International Women's Day is also known as Queen's Day, as brands encourage women to treat themselves like queens for a day. However, there have also been some more meaningful campaigns as brands seek to resonate with their female audience in China. One of the most talked about campaigns was Niwai's Nobody is Nobody, which provoked discussion around beauty standards by featuring women of different body shapes, ages and personalities. Chinese women have also started to display their increased confidence through their personal style. For example, in recent years, the minimalistic, sexually frigid style, think shapeless and simple clothes, has become popular among women who want to express their individuality. I would like to ask you the third quiz in this regard, that is, how we celebrate International Women's Day. The options are: number one, a day where the women, they are feeling independent or celebrating their independence; a day when women, they are feeling like they are having democratic rights; number three, the day when women are feeling that they are educated; number four, it is a Queen's Day for them, as they are treating, or they used to treat them on this particular day as the queens. So, the right answer is option 4, that is Queen's Day. International Women's Day is also being considered as Queen's Day for the women of the world. From birth to the workplace, from the political sphere to the home, women in China still face significant challenges in terms of gender equality. However, sparks of hope abound. Women have access to more job opportunities, are graduating from university in greater numbers than even before, and women's issues are becoming more widely discussed across society. For companies keen to advance their cause, success awaits. Feminism in China has a long history, dating back to the early 20th century. It has been closely linked with socialism and class issues, as I have discussed about the ideas of Mao Zedong on women. However, the feminist movement in China has faced significant challenges, including government censorship and repression. There are many feminist activists in China, including women leaders from diverse groups. Some of them are Gay Yoli, who was involved as a young leader in various urban-based organizational activities funded by international donors to disseminate feminist ideas. Zhang Lixi, vice president of the Chinese Women's College that affiliates with the All China Women's Federation, who has promoted women's studies in her college, and Gao Xiaoxian, who holds an official position in the Shaanxi Women's Federation while creating several women's organizations outside the official system to engage in legal services for women. Anti-domestic violence movements and issues of gender and development are also a part of her agenda. Oppression and discrimination against women are widespread in various parts of Chinese society, including the labor market and home life. At home, many women suffer from domestic violence, which some refer to as China's hidden epidemic. So we have heard about the epidemics like cholera, plague, malaria, and other diseases like AIDS or HIV. We have heard about pandemic, that was corona. But China's hidden epidemic is domestic violence that still exists. The All China Women's Federation, a state-backed women's rights organization, reported in late 2019 that no less than 30% of married women in China have experienced some kind of domestic violence. In the labor market, gender discrimination against women is common. According to a study by All China Women's Federation, 87% of female graduates have experienced at least one type of gender discrimination while job searching. Social media has played a crucial role in the rise of the feminist movement in China. Women have to a greater extent used social media as a platform to propel dialogue about and fight against sexual assault and harassment, sexism and stereotypes. In China, there are few outlets for women to go about this publicly, which is why many go online. More specifically, Weibo, China's equivalent to Twitter, has served as a platform for women to share their views on and experiences with gender-related issues, such as domestic violence and gender discrimination in the workplace. Gender-related issues are not seldom among the most discussed topics on Weibo. However, speaking out often comes at a price, as many of those who do so have faced threats and censorship. Yang Li, one of China's most famous comedians, who is known as the Punchline Queen, is one example. Yang addresses controversial gender issues during her stand-up routines on Chinese television. In one episode from December 2020, Yang said that she had told a male comedian her new jokes, who in response said that she was testing men's limits. When telling this story, Yang sarcastically asked if men even have limits. This sparked anger and criticism from male netizens who accused her of man-hating. As feminists are challenging lingering traditional gender roles, norms, and stereotypes that are deeply rooted in Chinese society, while at the same time raising awareness about issues regarding women's rights, they are, by extension, also calling for change on these matters. The challenges facing Chinese feminists are manifold. In addition to pushing for change and raising awareness about women's situation in China, they must also cope with gender antagonism in society, online feminist critics, and the government's monitoring and censorship efforts. I hope my students they enjoyed or liked the lecture on position of women in modern China and some aspects on Chinese feminism highlighting the writings of Mao Zedong. Thank you.